But growth alone is not enough. Individual Singaporeans must see progress in their lives, must feel that their future is bright, and must know that each one of us has our stake in it. And this means sharing growth widely and equitably to improve the lives of all Singaporeans. It also means fully maximizing the talents and efforts of our people and getting the most capable and reliable people into the most consequential jobs where they can make the most difference and the greatest contribution. In other words, making sure there's social mobility so that our meritocracy continues to work. How do we know if our meritocracy is working? Well, first of all, every child must have a good start in life, regardless of which family you were born into. Secondly, every talent has to be recognized and developed to the fullest. Thirdly, every opportunity has to be open to anyone with the right attitude and ability. And finally, a capable person must face minimal social impediments. Minimal social impediments to being accepted, to contribute, to be in a position to lead in society. And in the long term, this last part, keeping the social impediments down, is the most difficult to sustain. We want Singapore society to maintain an informal and egalitarian tone where people interact freely and comfortably as equals, and there are no rigid class distinctions or barriers that keep good people down. This is important, but it is beyond the government's ability to bring about alone. Society itself has to be open and permeable. Each one of us must carry those attitudes, those values, those norms, that willingness to welcome talent, welcome ability, to keep the system the way it is. Any society which has been stable for a long time tends to stratify, and it becomes less socially mobile. For example, the UK and India have long entrenched hierarchies and very fixed notions of class, or in India, caste, which they have found very difficult to overcome. Singapore is still a young country of 50 years, and notions of class and hierarchy have not yet calcified. Our social cues, our markers, our norms, they're still evolving, and we don't want them to evolve in the wrong direction and contribute to class divisions and rigidities. Social cues are important because they can become ways to pigeonhole or to exclude others, knowingly or unknowingly. In Britain, your accent, the way you speak, can define your status in society. Do you have a posh public school accent? Do you speak like a professional who's been to Oxbridge? Do you speak as a working class person with a local accent, regional accent? Do you speak Cockney twang? Then you know you come from a certain part of London and you are a certain class of person, not very high up the totem pole. So George Bernard Shaw wrote, "An Englishman's way of speaking absolutely classifies him." Classifies him, it's a pun. It pigeonholes him into his social class. You listen to him, you know. Do you respect him? Do you look down on him? Do you give him orders, or do you say, "Yes, sir"? And he went on to say, absolutely classifies him. The moment he talks, he makes some other Englishman despise him. And it's true. If you don't have an upper class accent, you're marked down straight away. And that is why Singapore schools put emphasis on teaching students who speak good English. Otherwise, those children whose parents already speak good English at home will be fine, but others will grow up at a permanent disadvantage. And without everyone being proficient speaking standard English, Singlish will become a class marker. In other words, if you can't speak proper English, well, you are down there. If you can't speak proper English, the door's open for you. And I think this would close the doors on many from less privileged families. And that's why MCI continues to have campaigns to teach people to speak proper English. There are other social markers that can signal and entrench class differences. Members may recall the recent fuss over an unauthorized secondary school social studies textbook, guidebook. It contained a table that had sweeping generalizations about people in Singapore from high and low social economic statuses, SES. For instance, supposedly, low SES speaks English, play soccer or basketball, and eat at hawker centers, while high SES speak formal English, play golf or tennis, and only eat at fine restaurants. The story went viral. Many Singaporeans were appalled, and rightly so. Luckily, it was not a guidebook approved by MOE. Lifestyle choices can indeed become separators in society, distinguishing marks. What you eat, how you dress, where you go for holidays, what games you play, what clubs you belong to. In every society, people have ways to show who is in and who's out. You take one look at a person or you listen to him for a moment and you can already place him. There are distinctions in Singapore society too, but the general tone in Singapore is one of restraint. If you wear a chunky gold watch and dress flashily, instead of being impressed, people may think you are a loan shark. And that is as it should be. We must discourage people from flaunting their social advantages. We should frown upon those who go for ostentatious displays of wealth and status, or worse, look down on others less well-off and privileged. We should emphasize our commonalities, not accentuate our differences. And so you see, if you look around the chamber, everybody informally dressed discussing serious matters of state. In any other parliamentary chamber in this part of the world, or anywhere in the world, we'd all be togged up in our Sunday best, just to show that we are somebody in society. But that's not the Singapore way. There's a further obstacle to social mobility. Elite groups who become closed circles, preventing outsiders from getting in. Every society has its elite. They occupy the key leadership positions in society, in government, in academia, in business, in professions, in politics. Members of the elite share similar backgrounds, interests, social spaces. They may be alumni of the same schools, they may have done business with one another, they may have worked in the same professions. They know one another, they have interacted with one another in different roles over long periods through their lives. Such networks are natural structures in society. They are useful for people to get to know one another, to get things done informally, to share an implicit understanding of the interests of their society, and to feel a collective sense of responsibility for the society. And such networks are an important part of our social capital. But social networks must always remain open and permeable. They must not close up, they must not form glass ceilings. It must not be difficult or impossible for others with talent or ability, but lacking the right backgrounds and connections, to be welcomed into the elite group, to rise to the top, to take their rightful place and make their full contribution. If this happened, not only would social mobility be frustrated, but soon the elite group would start to only look after its own interests and fail in their duty to lead and to care for the rest of the society. And that would be disastrous for Singapore. Let me share something which Ong Ye Kung told me recently. RI, Raffles Institution, is one of our most popular schools. I didn't go to RI, but I can tell you it's a good school. It has a strong tradition of accepting students from diverse backgrounds, so long as they make the cut. But over the years, RI has become less diverse. The new RI principal has been putting in the effort, speaking to parents of potential students in primary schools across Singapore to encourage them to apply to RI. To his surprise, some of the parents told him they didn't want to send their child there. Why? Not because they thought their child couldn't cope with the academic demands, but because they feared he wouldn't be able to fit in with other, more well-off students. Actually, I think this fear is unfounded. Because in reality, RI students do come from varied backgrounds. And just over half the students live in public housing, 53%. And all of the students get along confidently and comfortably. And bursaries and scholarships are readily available. So no parent needs to worry that he can't afford to send his child to RI or that his child will feel out of place. But if such a perception exists and discourages promising students from applying to the school, is not good for RI, is not good for Singapore. RI knows what it has to do in order to uphold its egalitarian tradition. MOE will work with them and other popular schools too, so that these schools never become self-perpetuating closed circles. Government policies and programs must and do support social mobility and meritocracy. We make sure the fundamentals are done well: quality education, home ownership, and affordable health care, which improve the lives of every Singaporean. We give everyone a good education, and now we're investing heavily in preschool to give all Singaporean kids, in fact, almost babies as well, a good start in life. We have a strong social safety net with targeted assistance schemes so that those with difficulties are not left behind and forgotten. And we intervene with extra help, whether in education, housing, healthcare, or jobs training, for those who need it, to enable them to take full advantage of the opportunities. Above all, our education system must stay open. We've set aside places in primary schools for children without affiliation to these schools, and we will do more if necessary. We are expanding opportunities for students from different schools to interact through sports, community activities, and the Outward Bound School. Last year, I visited the Outward Bound School for their 50th anniversary celebrations. I had attended the course 50 years ago. I chatted with Nicholas Concesio, who is the executive director of OBS, and I told him that when I went to OBS 50 years ago as a 15-year-old, they only took in 2 students per secondary school. So in a group of 130 odd, there were people from 50, 60 different schools, different language streams, very different social backgrounds. And we all had to get together because they mixed us up properly. And we went to the course together. We became good friends and came away understanding the diversity of our society better and how we could all work together. Because 17 days at that impressionable age, it's an intense experience. You are put through physically stressed, you're emotionally put to your limits, you have to work with others. There's very little that you can do alone, and if you don't make friends, you are miserable. And you have to make friends across boundaries. So I recounted this, and Nicholas told me that today, well, because of the larger numbers, they can't take in students from 60 or 70 schools at a time, but they take in students from 2 or 3 schools at a time. And nowadays, the students all speak English, but still, he finds clear differences in the cultures and interests of the students from the different schools, and even in the way they use language. So it's all speaking English, but different interests, different vocabulary, really different world perspectives, almost. At OBS, the students still learn to work in teams. So when they pitch a tent or build a raft or safely belay someone on an obstacle course, they must work closely with teammates. You can't do it alone. And so the students learn to bridge their differences and to trust one another. So after 50 years, OBS remains a valuable opportunity for students to mix and interact across different schools and social groups. And we will do more of this. So we're building an extension of OBS on Coney Island. When that opens, even more students will benefit from this experience. So we are doing many things to improve social mobility. But I have to be honest with you, there are no easy solutions. Many societies have faced this problem. Many ideas have been proposed and tried out. Political philosophers, statesmen, all powerful human minds have been brought to bear to try to deal with this conundrum of how to keep your society spry, open, stable. And there have been no magic bullets. There have been varying degrees of success. And the most successful models, perhaps, are the Scandinavian countries, but even they have seen widening social inequality in recent times. So we have to understand that this is what they call a wicked problem. It's a problem with no easy solution, which we will discuss rightly, repeatedly in this House through the years. Our strategy in Singapore has been more successful than most, with universal education, with home ownership, with the government's determination to widen opportunities and make the most of every citizen. We've made meritocracy work in Singapore. And now that our society is more settled, we must work harder to keep the pathways open and to level people up. The government is not ideological, we are pragmatic. We will try anything which works. We will learn from our own experience and the experience of others. But we must also be realistic. Spot what looks promising, but please also recognize what will not work. Some people have suggested, I read in the newspapers, a universal basic income, which is a neat idea, so far unproven anywhere in the world. The Finns tried it and aborted the experiment early. It didn't work for them. Others want to abolish the PSLE. That is, in fact, very hard to do. Educators have very different views, and even parents have very different views. Whether it's PSLE, you'd be better off without a PSLE. But we are taking the first steps to change the status quo by doing away with T-scores. And if anyone can come up with a better alternative, certainly we will consider it. In the end, the government must focus on practical, effective policies. As a society, we must uphold clear social norms that minimize social barriers and encourage mobility so as to keep our meritocratic system working well for all Singaporeans.